and in the meantime 40 million quid. And if you think of journalists and the police's approach to them, think of Neil Wallace. He was cooked by the police force for which he acted as a PR man.
Now, this week, it's also come out that GCHQ have been spying on the international human rights group, Amnesty International. I mean, is there any kind of... I mean, actually, I think today in The Guardian, in boycotts, saying that human rights groups as a whole are now calling for an immediate inquiry into why GCHQ was allowed to spy on Amnesty International. This does seem as if there hasn't actually anything... Nothing has changed, even since the Edward Snowden revelations, if that kind of thing can go on.
Can I be totally contrarian on this one? GCHQ spying on Amnesty International. The National Security Agency of the United States is spying on about 60% of our population. Which is more important? The national media are not reporting Prism. They're reporting a row between Amnesty International and GCHQ over something that happened 3 years ago. There's a real danger of this whole investigation into misdeeds by the security system turning into a kind of esoteric dogfight between certain parts of the media, certain parts of the law, and certain parts of the alleged privacy bodies. What's been lost in all of this, and these are diversions, what's been lost in all of this is the United States is committing criminal offences in the United Kingdom. It's spying on our kids, it's spying on us. And then the national media haven't reported it. I mean, on the 2nd of June, it was stated in Parliament that Prism, this spying programme, is a criminal offence. Have you heard anything from the government about this? They can't deny it because it is. And it.
Well, look, Kevin, the positive thing about Amnesty calling for an inquiry, and other human rights groups too, National Council for Civil Liberties, Privacy International, etc., is at least giving some sort of focus. Otherwise, I mean, how can you concentrate people's minds on mass surveillance because there's so many millions of people involved?
No, but do you really think that you concentrated by focusing on a very small group of bodies? I think this is a diversion, I'm sure of it, because this came up at this seminar this week. What we need to focus on is why the National Security Agency is gathering all the data. Why? And the national media aren't asking the question.
Okay, tell us about the seminar.
Okay, the seminar was one of the most senior barristers at QC in the whole issue of privacy. He's brought the cases against GCHQ and the others in this peculiar court, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. But if you're an ordinary
who's that? What's the name of the QC?
Oh, the Investigatory... It's a secret court.
No, the QC. Who is the QC?
Oh, Matthew Ryder. And we also had Rachel Logan from Amnesty International. So don't get me wrong, I'm not attacking, but I'm saying there is a terrible feeling of diversion about this away from the actual criminal offence that's being committed every day. This is what the seminar discussed. And it emerged in the seminar that a number of the journalists present felt that we hadn't told the public what's really going on. Now, you can't expect News International to do much about this, can you? It's emerged in the last few weeks that well-known charity, the CIA, when they were short of money, went to Rupert Murdoch. Furthermore, he gave them $200,000 to help them in their charitable purposes. And that's on the record in the Reagan Presidential Library. It turned up amongst the notes. That good old Roop got in there and bailed out the CIA.
What about your own court cases? Because you've been, you're all action and... Well, you're all talk and action, but anyway, you put your money where your mouth is, didn't you? And you actually know a little bit about the legal system. So how do you go about actually taking Microsoft to court or Google, these big companies?
I took Microsoft, Google, and Facebook to court, and I included this spying program, which they are paid to run. And their defence was that the courts of the United Kingdom have no jurisdiction over them. Unfortunately, my case came up in January. In March this year, the appeal court said, sorry, if you operate in this country, you are subject to the jurisdiction of our courts. And that same judgment added something critical. It made a breach of privacy a serious tort, a serious injury. So now these agents of the National Security Agency are facing two pincer movements. They're facing privacy actions, and they're facing the fact that the UK courts have jurisdiction. Ordinary people can now go to court and say, Microsoft, the company that supplies me with stuff for my computer, is stealing all my data, which they are. Now, to go back, at the seminar, the panel was asked, what are you doing about it? And the audience were quite surprised. Well, when I said, well, I've sued them. But why haven't the privacy bodies? The theft of the data that these 9 companies are doing is actually a criminal offence. And they, I've, in the paper I write for, Computer Weekly, we've said this 10 times. They have never sent a single letter threatening libel, because they can't. And the mistake was created by a person in the Home Office. This chap persuaded the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee and lots of others that if it was law in the United States, it was okay here. Well, actually, it isn't.
Well, I don't think America's legal jurisdiction actually does extend to Britain, last time I looked.
Well, no, and nothing, if I can quote from a letter I wrote to the Chief Justice of the United States, what Congress cannot do and what no law of the United States can do is make legal and lawful acts which are criminal and unlawful in the United Kingdom. And the 9 Prism company, I hate using this word because it, ordinary people, Prism, what's Prism? What these 9 companies have done is a continuous criminal offence since 2007. And the interesting thing is Cameron knows, and he has been unable to persuade Obama to pull off. The program is running, and all this information on ordinary British people.
Just remind us who those companies are, who they are.
Okay, they are Microsoft, Google, Facebook, AOL, Yahoo, YouTube, Skype.
And what you're saying is, you mentioned something quite interesting a little while. You're saying that these companies are being paid to run this Prism program.
Oh, yeah. The National Security Agency does not exist in British law. It's a foreign intelligence agency. And it's paying these 9 companies hundreds of millions of dollars to spy in the United Kingdom. It is crazy. But this is the kind of slow motion catastrophe that's happening inside the establishment and isn't being reported.
Old Labour Oxford economist Martin Summers, what are your thoughts about this? Because we're in a situation, as Kevin's describing there, as a very slow slide towards a surveillance state. That is where actually the authorities, in this case GCHQ and National Security Agency, think that they have rights to all of your data, including things like bank passwords, all this kind of stuff.
Everything.
Well, I mean, it's not really a slow slide, is it? It's a coup d'etat in a fairly short space of time. And I think if you look at the US Constitution, I think they've got it in the original Constitution. They said it's forbidden to interfere with private communications without a warrant from a judge, and it's in the Constitution.
But here's the thing. In the United States, the National Security Agency can't do this. Mm-hmm. What it's doing here. If the National Security Agency did in the United States what it's doing here through these 9 companies, they would be out. They really would be done.
Now, I can remember from the Yakuza agreement, which was, this is going back about 20 years or so, is that they had a system, didn't they, where the US agencies, like the NSA, would be spying on the Brits and then handing that information over to the people like MI5 and MI6 and security services and the government here, and the other way round in the United States. So GCHQ would be spying on the US population and handing that information on to the American government.
Yeah, our spooks never had the reach of these 9 companies. These 9 companies cover about 80% of our population, and it is extremely serious. The other thing that emerged in the seminar is none of the media, and I include myself in it, have explained to John Smith, the dustman in Birmingham, why does your data matter to these people? And the answer is they create profiles so they can manipulate you. That's all in the public domain.
Okay, so 5 to 7 now, so we really ought to cover some of the other stories this week. Martin, we've had there's a bit of a standoff, isn't there, over this Iran nuclear deal, with the Iranians absolutely sticking to their guns and saying we're not going to sign a deal unless part of that deal is lifting sanctions straight away.
Well, it's obviously coming under attack from the right wing in Israel and in the United States, and Obama probably wants it to go through as part of his legacy. But it's not at all clear that it's going to go through because there's all sorts of other factors complicating it, the war in Syria, relations with Russia, etc.
Kevin, what are your thoughts about the police files on child sex abuse at Gordonstone School in Scotland going missing in the Highlands, where the male members of the British royal family were educated, and the chap who was supposed to have the schoolmaster there done the abusing dies in a car crash in Africa?
Yeah, if it's really sensitive and affects the royals, and I don't know how the inquiry is going to deal with this, you find nothing surfaces. Everything's been burnt, shredded, disappeared.
Yes, but you see, then that's perverting the course of justice, which is a very serious offence in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about places like Gordonstone? It's sort of out of the way. It kind of sounds like a bit of a spooky place, and this is really for the elite of aristocracy of British society.
Well, certainly the atmosphere in Gordonstone was severe, and I would have said it was neo-fascist. You know, discipline, and there was this horrible ring of the Hitler Youth about, running around in the cold showers of Scotland, and it was really nasty. But I think where it affects the royals, nothing will be found.
The West is losing the Twitter battle with fanatics, says General Sir Richard Barron says the armed forces must take up the fight on social media. He's actually saying, Martin, that they should start lying on social media in order to win the war against the extremists.
Well, I mean, it's not really news to us that these people lie on social media, but I think it's very indicative of the way things are going. They're talking about narrative in relation to terrorism rather than factual matters. How was a bomb made? Who carried it? Who gave the orders? We're talking all the time in broad brush terms of people having crazy ideas that have got to be suppressed. This is actually police, if you like. It's anti-investigation. It's a way of smoothing over the contradictions in official stories.
If you hire a soldier, what you should do is give him a gun and put him in a trench. You shouldn't allow him loose in social media or anything else. This general is talking through his hat. This is the wrong way to go about dealing with terrorism.
There's another story on Media Lens, the critical media website, saying hacks and spooks, close encounters of a strange kind. And this is from a conference earlier on this year. They're looking at a whole load of statistics to do with the number of spooks and something which has supposedly been abolished, called the Information Research Department, saying basically 50% of foreign correspondents from London press, TV, radio and etc. are actually being paid, never mind just being friendly with, but actually getting money from the MI6, the Foreign Intelligence Services.
Yeah. You see, if you or I impersonated a spook, we'd be in serious trouble. But the spooks are allowed to suborn and impersonate us and put us at risk, at no risk to themselves. There should be, the real answer is put a law that any spook who interferes with or pretends to be a journalist gets 5 years.
How do you tell the difference between a journalist and a journalist spook then?
You develop suspicions over the years.
I mean, what's your experience of this? Do you think there really is so many people
I do.
involved? What evidence do you have for that?
Well, again, it's going to be esoteric, but very briefly, I once needed some documents, and I picked 3 Fleet Street senior journalists and gave them a story. And would you believe the documents I needed turned up about 4 weeks later? So I didn't know which one it was. That's the trouble.
Okay. Time to sign off now. Murdoch News at 7 o'clock, followed by Arabian Nights, possibly our sister show Dialects here on Tuesdays at noon, where you can hear from an economic hitman, and also part 2 of Princess Diana in Her Own Worlds. Thanks to our guests in the first hour, Anthony Negus and Christine Townsend. Also thanks to Basil Valentine and Kevin Cahill and Martin Summers. You can follow us on Twitter, but we're back in 2 weeks. I'm Tony Gosling, wishing you a relaxing and enjoyable weekend, and we're online at thisweek.org.uk. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Live from the Sky News Centre.